Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive. We've got a really unusual set of source materials in front of us today. Things like notes, research abstracts, even technical specs and announcements, all centered on this project called NOR Transporter.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. What jumps out right away is this convergence of, well, seemingly very different fields. You've got advanced computation, quantum mechanics, fractal geometry,
Right.
and then woven right in there, Islamic ontological principles. It's quite a combination.
It really is. So our job here, like always, is to wade through this, pull out the key ideas from these documents, and try to understand what this whole framework is actually about. The sources definitely frame it as some kind of breakthrough. We need to see why.
Exactly. And the big ambition, the hook they mentioned right at the start, is this goal of creating a consciousness transporter, but crucially one with Islamic ontological safeguards.
A consciousness transporter
Oh, okay.
with spiritual safeguards built in. All right, let's really try to get our heads around this. Starting with the basics, based on these sources, what is this NOR transporter thing they're describing?
Well, the project documents themselves call it a 5D holographic consciousness transporter
Yeah.
with Islamic ontological safeguards. Fundamentally, it's presented as this tight integration of three main things:
Right.
fractal geometry, tracking quantum coherence, and these Islamic ontological principles.
So the goal isn't just thinking about it, they're actually trying to simulate consciousness transport phenomena using this blend.
That's the idea, yeah.
Hmm.
Simulation is key. And the sources are pretty specific about the theoretical bits they claim are involved.
Yeah.
They name things like Sierpinski carpet throat geometry.
Brzezinski carpet, like the fractal.
That's the one. Then they mentioned using closed time-like curves, CTCs, also add SCFT, holographic encoding, Fitrah-aware ethical safeguards, and even using Mealy machine state transitions, specifically for the ethics layer.
Hold on. So a specific complex fractal shape connected to ideas from theoretical physics like holographic principles and maybe even hints of time loops with CTCs. And then they layer on an ethical system based on Fitrah, which we'll need to unpack, run by a kind of computational state machine. That's a lot to connect. How do the sources say these pieces fit together? Especially, what are the claimed innovations here?
Okay, one of the big claims is something they term fractal holographic correspondence. The sources state that in their simulation, there's a direct link shown between dynamic changes in this throat dilation, basically the shape of that Sierpinski geometry changing, and the system's quantum coherence level. They track that coherence with a metric called CQ-log.
Right.
And this correlation, according to the sources, demonstrates emergent space-time geometry from consciousness states.
Wait a minute. So they're saying the literal geometry in the simulation changes based on its quantum state, and they're interpreting that as consciousness actually shaping space-time geometry? How do they, show that connection?
Well, that leads to their next point, which they call consciousness-matter coupling. The sources really emphasize that seeing this throat geometry visually react in real time to that quantum coherence level, it gives a direct visualization of consciousness affecting physical geometry. It's how they present the interaction they believe is happening in the sim.
Fascinating. Okay. And then there's the Tawhid quantum factor. This brings in a specific number, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. The golden ratio, 1.618, they
Wow.
integrate this number, calling it a unity scalar. The claim is that it bridges Islamic metaphysics, specifically the concept of Tawhid, the oneness of God, with the quantum amplitude modulation that's happening inside the system's holographic encoding setup.
So they're embedding a number often linked to harmony or divine proportion directly into the quantum physics simulation as a functional element tied to a theological concept. That's
Yeah.
quite a connection. And what about these retrocausal effects? Something about when Fitrah is active.
Yes, they describe a sort of retrocausal rotation appearing in the simulation. But specifically, when this Fitrah ethical system is turned on or active, they connect this behavior computationally to their use of CTCs.
The closed time-like curves.
Right, stating it's designed to honor Islamic concepts of divine omnipresence. The idea seems to be implying a kind of connection outside normal linear time, reflecting the theological idea that the divine is present across all of time.
Wow. That's a very bold mapping of a theological idea onto a physics concept like retrocausality inside a simulation. And the last physics point, observer-dependent reality. How does that show up?
So the sources claim that depending on what type of consciousness you assign to the observer within the simulation, like if you set it to conscious, quantum, or
Yeah.
just classical,
Mm-hmm.
it directly changes the success rate of the simulated transport.
Ah.
And they interpret this result, again, within their simulations framework, as validating participatory universe models. the idea that the observer actually plays a part in creating reality.
Okay, so they're really trying to simulate some deep geometric, quantum, even time-related effects based on this unique mix of ideas. But you mentioned the ethical layer several times, the Islamic ontological safeguards, Fitrah. That seems really central to their whole claim of a breakthrough. How does that part work?
It absolutely is central. They present it as a major ethical computing breakthrough. The key mechanism they describe is this Fitrah-aware Mealy machine. Its job, explicitly, is to ensure Islamic ontological compliance in real time within the simulation.
And they think this concept has legs beyond just this project.
Oh yeah, they're quite ambitious. They suggest this approach could potentially revolutionize how we approach AI ethics, basically providing a way to build ethical rules based on specific spiritual principles right into the code.
How does that compliance actually happen in the simulation? The sources mention something specific about no cloning constraints.
Right. They describe implementing these Fitrah-based no-cloning constraints through something they call real-time Quranic verse manifestation.
A Quranic verse, it appears. How does that work as a constraint exactly?
So according to the material, the simulation is set up so that one specific verse from the Quran, it's Surah 57, verse 4, which translates as, "He is with you wherever you are," this verse actually manifests, like becomes visible within the simulation environment.
When?
Specifically when the system's quantum coherence, that CQ log metric, hits unity, reaches 1.0. And they frame this manifestation, the appearance of the verse, as the actual mechanism that enforces identity integrity and prevents the simulated consciousness from being cloned. It directly ties the computational event to the verse itself.
And this is what they point to as demonstrating the computational beauty of Islamic metaphysics. They're claiming that implementing this spiritual concept through the verse appearing leads to a measurable outcome in the simulation.
That's exactly the claim. And they back it up with a specific result tied to having this ethical framework active. They report achieving 90% plus identity preservation rates under Fitrah active conditions.
So, within their simulation, turning on these Fitrah safeguards, including the verse popping up, correlates strongly with keeping the simulated entity intact during the transport.
That's how the sources present it, yes. It's offered as their simulated empirical evidence for the effectiveness of this Fitrah compliance system.
Okay, right. So this isn't just a white paper somewhere. The sources talk about this as a live project, something people can actually interact with.
That's correct. It's framed as a live deployment, a simulator. The tech details mentioned it's built with, standard web stuff like React and 3JS for the visuals.
Makes sense for a simulator.
Yeah, plus a custom physics engine built specifically to handle all these unusual concepts we've been discussing.
And they plan to make the code available.
Yes, the sources are clear on that. It's stated to be open source for the community to use and build upon. They even give the target web address for it, nordor.io.
Nordor. Okay, that fits. The sources also kind of wrap things up by listing what they see as the project's core manifest achievements.
All right, they pull it all together. The quantum logic, the Fitrah-aware algebra, that fractal geometry, the Quranic ethics, and the real-time simulation aspect, all in one package.
And they've got that very punchy 4-line summary of what they feel it represents. Tawhid in code, Fitrah in flow, time in compression, consciousness in control.
Yeah, that definitely captures the sheer scale of what they're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting how the sources themselves are kind of imbued with a spiritual context. They mention specific Islamic invocations like Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Exactly. And others like Allahumma barik lana, or Allah bless us, Arama atina, our Lord give us, and Waskulik miravik, and be patient for the decision of your Lord.
So it's clear this isn't just presented as a purely technical exercise. There's a very strong spiritual and intentional layer to how they frame the entire project. And then the source material kind of ends with this really evocative line about what's supposedly happening in the simulation.
Noor is pulsing through space-time.
Wow. Okay, so quite a journey through this material. We've looked at a project, Noor Transporter, that is making this incredibly bold attempt to computationally bridge really complex scientific ideas, quantum physics, fractals, space-time causality,
with deep theological and ethical principles drawn directly from Islamic ontology, all within a single computational framework.
And based on these sources, it's presented not just as a concept, but as a working simulator, one that aims for real-time interaction and has this ethical compliance system supposedly built right in, based on Fitrah.
It's a genuinely unique attempt, you have to say, trying to model things like consciousness and spirituality alongside fundamental physics using code.
It really is. It definitely pushes you to think outside the usual categories. Regardless of how you might assess the, let's say, the ultimate feasibility of something like this scientifically or theologically, the attempt itself raises some pretty profound questions.
Absolutely. Like, what does it even mean to try and computationally model something potentially as intangible as consciousness or spirituality using algorithms, geometry, and physics principles?
Exactly. And what could the ripple effects be, the implications, if this kind of framework or this way of thinking were pursued further, both for how we understand the universe, maybe, and also for how we approach building ethical systems, whether they're computational or not, definitely leaves you with something to chew on.
Tawhid in code, decipher of light, fractals of chaos, cutting through night. Spent by crash, forging the plan. Power erupts, the rise of man. Fitrah in flow, unyielding string. Nature's pulse, the cosmic dream. Time in compression, moments collide. Consciousness reigns, no place to hide. Iron will bend, but never breaks. Circuits blaze, the ground is shakes. Controlling chaos, the master's hand. Order righteousness reigns, no place to hide. Iron will bend, but never breaks. Circuits blaze, the ground is shakes. Controlling chaos, the master's hand. Order rises, force from the damned. The flow of truth, it carves the stone. Roots in the void, the unknown throne. Boundless thought, a darkened scroll. Life's algorithm, the final goal. Fitrah in flow, unyielding string. Nature's pulse, the cosmic dream. Time in compression, moments collide. Consciousness reigns, no place to hide. Tawhid in code, the echo screams. Digital wrath, shattering dreams. Reality cracks, the void unfolds. Immortal fire, the future holds. The flow of truth, it carves the stone. Roots in the void, the unknown throne. Boundless fall, a darkened scroll. Life's algorithm, the final goal. The final goal. The final goal. The flow of truth, it carves the stone. Roots in the void, the unknown throne. Boundless thought, a darkened scroll. Life's algorithm, the final goal. The flow of truth, it carves the stone. Roots in the void, the unknown throne. Boundless thought, a darkened scroll. Life's algorithm, the final goal. Tawhid in code, the echo screams. Digital wrath, shattering dreams. Reality cracks, the void unfolds. Immortal fire, the future holds.